First of all, though, it's my pleasure to welcome back to the show Representative Ryan Winkler, 46A. He is the House Majority Leader. He's kind enough today to join us to talk a little bit about Election Day. Representative, thanks so much for the time.
Happy to be here.
My pleasure. You are, of course, first of all, your thoughts. I mean, what are you seeing? What are you hearing about turnout on Election Day so far here in Minnesota?
Well, I know a lot of Democrats who are Election Day voters, and so while we've had huge, unprecedented early vote totals coming in, we still have a lot of people making their way to the polls on Election Day who we know are strong Democratic voters. And, it's just there's no precedent in history for a massive voter turnout not favoring Democrats on the ballot. So the kind of numbers we're seeing should be the strongest indication there is of a good night ahead for the DFL in Minnesota.
I think it does. One of the things I will agree with you on there. One of the things I'm a little concerned about is I've heard from a lot of people, specifically in Minneapolis and some of the surrounding areas, that you would think it'd be a lot of people voting still, not that busy. Polling places were really busy to begin with the day, but relatively easy to get in, get out, which is great. You need to go vote right now. Obviously the Republicans in the state were banking a lot on if they could get a huge turnout advantage on Election Day. Are you seeing anything that gives you the implication we're more like Wyoming this time around? Because that's about the only way they're going to win this thing, I think, at this point.
I don't see any indication of that whatsoever. We're seeing people who didn't even vote in 16 and 18, hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans turning out, and voters consistently saying that COVID is the number one issue, giving Joe Biden and the Democrats top marks, the governor, for handling coronavirus. And, we're all skittish. We're all nervous. We all remember, feeling like the outcome in 2016 couldn't happen, and then it did. But there's just not a lot of data that shows that this is anything like 2016. So, I very much doubt that there's anybody listening to your show who has not voted or doesn't have a plan to vote already, or needs any reminder about the stakes in this election or the necessity of getting in line by 8 o'clock tonight. But the fact of the matter is, everything that really can be done has been done. The turnout operation has been huge. Reports from people doing virtual phone banks around the state and texting and all the other GOTV kind of activities we've been engaged in is really that, there just aren't that many more people left to turn out. Mm-hmm. So we would expect to see some bounce back today amongst Republicans, but the overall numbers are still should be, significantly to our advantage.
I'm hoping an early Christmas president and a Senate that backs up the DFL House. That would be a really nice thing to get. One of the things that I found to be interesting about the election in Minnesota, we have the DFL and the Democrats as a whole are a wildly diverse party. I mean, you have Colin Peterson, you guys, John Hoffman, Senator Hoffman, kind of more on that moderate side. You have Ilhan Omar, you have Jimmy Becker Finn, you've got Joe Biden. A good moderate Democrat there. Kamala Harris, you've got a wide variety. And it blew my mind. It seemed like the Republicans' main argument was to go to the most conservative county in the state and take that platform and try to force it on every other part of the state, including in the metro area where that far extreme right platform was just not going to work. I mean, I think the problem with the Republicans is if it's not Hillary Clinton they're running against, they don't quite know what to do, and they just basically throw out the most extreme positions, and they hope that works.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. The strength that Democrats have is that we represent, every part of the state, not just rural districts. We represent rural districts, but we represent regional centers, the inner city, the suburbs, exurbs. In the Minnesota legislature, we represent every race, religion, background, and are pretty representative of Minnesota as a whole. And the Republicans, on the other hand, are very much focused on a ideological crusade, narrowing down their agenda and really just focusing in on a few key things. So, we have the advantage of representing a lot of people. We have the disadvantage sometimes that our message is all over the place. And, Minnesotans, I think, need to vote in such a way that the voices of all the people can be heard. And right now, the only way to do that is through the DFL.
Mm-hmm. Ryan Winkler joining us, a representative, Minnesota House 46A, and of course the House Majority Leader. Representative, when did you become a Biden fan? Was it during the primaries? Were you always on the Biden train, or is it something that when he won the nomination, you jumped on that train?
Well, I definitely was not a Biden supporter early on. I did think that he might be the candidate who would win in the end, but we needed to go through a wide-open primary season to be confident that the candidate with the best shot at winning in November would come through. I think that people are looking for stability, they're looking for security, they're looking for experience in a time of not just one crisis, but multiple crises happening. And Biden represents continuity through the Obama administration and a lot of, history of knowing how the federal government works. So I think he is a bit of a breather for people, a bit of a sense that you can have confidence that at least the basics are getting accomplished in the White House. And I think the choice of Kamala Harris is a strong indicator of where the future is taking us. Mm-hmm. A much more diverse, much more equitable society, and an agenda focused more on all the ways in which our society is changing. That, to me, is kind of what we're seeing here, a bridge from a crisis into a better future.
Joe Biden, you cannot deny one thing. I mean, when he was part of the integral part of the Affordable Care Act. I mean, we work Congress pretty well. He knows how to do that. His foreign policy chops are as good as anyone in Washington, D.C. I mean, it'll be nice to redeem our reputation internationally, that's for sure. But yet here you are, and you have a guy in Biden who is John McCain's family has endorsed him. A lot of former Republicans, notice it's always the former ones. They're all saying, I mean, it's time for some competence. It's not he's really a moderate Republican. They're just tired of it. I mean, he represents the competent, intelligent adult choice this election cycle, and it really is kind of a no-brainer at this point. I really do think.
Well, what we're hearing from House candidates is that they are still calling Republicans and still getting votes. That they're, the switch is significant. Whether that sticks around, that's unclear because underlying this crisis with COVID are deep disparities in our society, a deep sense of unease about basic economic security, a division really between people who are ready to embrace a more diverse and open society and those who want to hold on to a more traditional path. And so we have a lot of underlying issues. And the great thing about the democratic process is it's an avenue for people to get their feelings, their resentments, their dreams all out on the table and try to make a decision together as a nation. And it's a pretty glorious thing.
Considering Minneapolis became the epicenter of racial inequity, racial violence, the George Floyd murder, the uprising that happened afterwards. Talk a little bit about Joe Biden, how he's going to be able to. I mean, we definitely have to heal this country, and clearly talking about good people on both sides and encouraging racists is not the way to go here. Talk a little bit about how you feel Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be able to, to help out, to make these first steps, get down this path, and start a more substantive conversation that we've needed to have for decades on how we move forward as a country with as ethnic and diverse as it is. Well,
first of all, I think the decency of Joe Biden is something that people just they can't disregard or look away from or kind of not believe. It's just so obvious that he is the kind of person he portrays himself as, and it's just the kind of antidote to what we have in the White House now that I think makes people feel comfortable. And what that allows him to do is dial down the volume and dial down the temperature on our conversation. Because if we want to talk about racial divisions, or we want to talk about immigration, or we want to talk about how to reform our economy to address things like climate change and deep economic insecurity, we have to be able to listen to each other, and we have to be able to see our common humanity. And when we're all amped up, all dialed up, and it's all about one outrage to the next, it's really hard to get people in a space where they can open up and see each other better. And I really think that is an opportunity for us. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we will be able to take it, but I do think at the very least we will get a breather, and we will have somebody who represents good faith and fairness in the White House, and hopefully that brings more of that part of our character out as a nation.
You just nailed it. It's a breather. We all want a breather. We all want to. I don't want to have to look at my news feed 50 times a day about what did he do now. I mean, that's what I think. Reality, whether the issue may be, it's the thought. I think that's what people are hoping for, and I think this is why people are anxious and are on edge. I mean, when you're campaigning, 46A should mention that's Representative Winkler's district, North St. Louis Park, Southern Golden Valley, and then basically the area around Medicine Lake and Plymouth, south of the southern side of Plymouth. When you're out in your district, talk a little bit about the anxiety and the concern that you ran into when talking to the constituents.
Well. It's palpable and obvious, and people want something much better. I represent a district where a lot of the people are economically secure, where they are, working in professional jobs where they can work from home, where the school systems are able to handle distance learning, and the kids are able to do okay. I mean, so relatively fortunate people. What I have seen, however, is so many people on their own diving into politics and making a statement who have never been directly involved in the DFL or the political process before. Something I have never seen before was about a 12-year-old girl writing "Vote Today" in chalk on the middle of the street in my neighborhood. Just the level of engagement is off the charts. And it's partly driven by anxiety. I think it's partly driven by disgust with what we have in the White House. But I also think it's driven by a sense that we actually have to be involved, that the country, the state, are only as good as we make it. And if we are sitting on the sidelines, if we are not involved, we shouldn't expect better than what we're getting. So I see that as a real hope, a real moment of opportunity. And, the insecurity, the anxiety, the division maybe helped to fuel it, but I don't think it has interfered with people's belief that something is better if we work for it.
I would be remiss if we didn't take a quick second to admire another branch of government. Secretary of State Steve Simon, this entire process, you have a major election during a pandemic. I can't say enough positive things about his office and how he has managed an incredibly difficult election cycle. It has been wonderful, his leadership at Secretary of State.
Yeah, it has. I've been friends with Steve for a long time, and this is exactly what I would expect of him. A genuine commitment to fairness and integrity. And he is fortunate to have city and county election officials all over Minnesota who are committed to the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so without that partnership, he wouldn't be able to be as successful as he has been. And frankly, we made relatively small changes to Minnesota's election laws during the last legislative session with the support of Republicans because we needed that in the state Senate. And that extra bit of flexibility has been hugely beneficial. And then you marry state and local officials with a citizenry in our state that has a tradition of high turnout and civic engagement. And, I think this election is moving as flawlessly as, so flawlessly we could not have imagined it happening this way in a pandemic, but yet here we are.
After that Eighth Circuit Court ruling, you thought to yourself, wow, this is going to be trouble. But I mean, and don't get me wrong, I am, as a veteran, I'm infuriated about the idea that we have active duty troops whose votes they'll be segregated right now, and likely Republicans will try to get those votes thrown out. But the way that the entire Secretary of State's office and the DFL as a whole moved on that and said, okay, everyone stop mailing, get those ballots in. I think that's going to definitely make a difference when we get to final tallies tonight.
Yeah, and that's because we had people on the ground who were making calls and volunteering at unbelievable rates. We have the infrastructure to get the word out, and that's also the power of the Democratic Party in Minnesota. We really do represent every part of the state and have ties and relationships in every kind of community. So it helps us when those kinds of last-minute changes come along, and it's really the work of the DFL going forward. We really have to help knit together our state in a way that we haven't had to do in a long time.
You're going to be my final Democrat of the day this election cycle. You'll get the final word here. Make that case for anyone out there, if there is anyone out there who hasn't voted and still does not know who they're going to vote for. Make that case for Joe Biden.
It's a very simple case. If you think the country is heading in the right direction right now, if you think the nation is better off than we were 4 years ago when we took an experimental leap by electing an amateur politician and professional self-promoter and made him the president of the United States. If you think that we are better now than we were then I guess you should vote for President Trump. But if you think that this country could do better, then this is the moment to make your voice count, because there is no other time, probably in our lifetimes, when your vote could matter more than it does right now.
Representative, thank you very much. Here's to hoping you have a much larger House majority. Here's to hoping you got that Senate DFL to go along with it, and of course with Governor Walz. Thank you very much. Thanks for your leadership this year. It's been exceptional, and I really appreciate the time today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk, and we're not hoping, we're working.
Yeah, well, and it shows, and it does show. Representative Ryan Winkler, 46A, Democrat of the day.